Imagine waking up in an economy where everything becomes more expensive, but people are also losing jobs. That's stagflation, one of the worst economic situations possible. Normally, inflation happens when the economy is strong, and recessions happen when demand becomes weak. But stagflation combines both problems together. Prices rise, growth slows, and ordinary people get squeezed from every direction. In normal economies, there's usually a balance. When growth becomes too strong, inflation rises, so central banks increase interest rates. When growth becomes weak, they cut rates to stimulate spending. That's the traditional economic playbook. But stagflation breaks this relationship completely. The economy becomes weak, while inflation still stays high. Stagflation is basically two economic disasters happening at the same time. First comes stagnation, weak growth, unemployment, and slowing business activity. Then comes inflation, rising prices and falling purchasing power. This means people earn less while expenses keep increasing. Businesses struggle to survive, and consumers suffer silently. The economy weakens, while life becomes more expensive every single day. The scary part about stagflation is that most economic tools stop working properly. If central banks raise interest rates to control inflation, growth slows down even more. But if governments inject money to stimulate the economy, inflation gets worse. Every solution creates another problem. This traps policymakers in a very dangerous situation. Instead of solving the crisis, they often end up managing damage. Stagflation usually begins with a major shock to the economy. For example, oil prices may suddenly surge, making transportation and production more expensive. Supply chain breakdowns can create shortages and push prices higher. Wars and geopolitical tensions can disrupt commodities and energy markets. And excessive money printing can flood the system with liquidity. As costs rise everywhere, businesses slow down and consumers suffer. The world already experienced stagflation during the 1970s. In 1973, OPEC reduced oil supply to Western countries, creating a massive energy crisis. Fuel prices exploded across the economy. Businesses faced rising costs while economic growth collapsed. People saw gas shortages, panic, and falling confidence everywhere. For the first time, economists realized the traditional system could fail. Inflation punishes people unevenly. Wealthy asset owners can survive rising prices using real estate, equities, and commodities as hedges. Ordinary people face expensive food, rising rent, costly fuel, and stagnant wages, quietly destroying their purchasing power. Stagflation hurts everyone, but not equally. Wealthy investors may survive because assets like real estate or commodities can protect wealth. But ordinary people face rising food prices, higher rent, and expensive fuel. At the same time, wages often remain stagnant. This slowly destroys purchasing power without people fully realizing it at first. Life becomes more stressful, even if salaries stay the same. During stagflation, almost every major asset class struggles. Stocks fall because companies face rising costs and weaker consumer demand. Bonds also suffer because inflation reduces the real value of fixed returns. Consumers start cutting spending to survive. Businesses freeze hiring and reduce investments due to uncertainty. Fear spreads across markets, creating long periods of volatility. Central banks face an impossible balancing act during stagflation. If they aggressively raise rates, the economy may crash into recession. But if they cut rates too early, inflation can return even stronger. This creates massive uncertainty for investors and businesses. Markets become extremely volatile because nobody knows the correct policy path. Economic management turns into pure damage control. After years of cheap money, stagflation fears started returning again. The pandemic disrupted global supply chains and slowed production worldwide. Energy prices surged because of geopolitical tensions and wars. At the same time, central banks had already injected massive liquidity into the system. This combination created fears of weak growth and persistent inflation together. Suddenly, markets started asking, is stagflation coming back? Modern economies look powerful on the surface, but stagflation exposes their weaknesses. Global systems depend heavily on stable energy, supply chains, and consumer confidence. When multiple shocks hit together, these systems become fragile very quickly. Even advanced economies struggle to respond effectively. That's why stagflation creates fear far beyond just inflation numbers. It reveals how vulnerable the entire economic structure can be. A normal recession hurts growth, but inflation may cool down. Normal inflation hurts purchasing power, but the economy may still grow. But stagflation attacks both growth and purchasing power together. Jobs disappear, while living costs continue rising. And unlike normal crises, there's no easy solution or quick escape. That's why stagflation is considered one of the biggest nightmares in economics.